Now, Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
It's 7:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson, Larry O'Connor in the house. And, there have been some sort of interesting things that have come out post-election, like districts where 100% of the votes went for Barack Obama, in some cases where 141% of the votes went for Barack Obama. And we received an email from one of our listeners. Her name is Dara Fox, and she's on the line now. Dara, how are you?
Hey, I'm fine.
Good morning, Dara.
Guys. How are you?
Now, Dara, you were a poll watcher. I want to just set this up and go through some of the things that are in the email that you sent us. Mm-hmm. You were a poll watcher at the Elks Lodge on Minneville Road in Woodbridge on Election Day, right?
Yes.
And you were among, there were 3 Republican poll watchers and 2 Democratic poll watchers. Is that right?
There were 3 plus me, so there were 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats.
I got you. Okay. So over the course of the day in this email that you sent us, you laid out some things that you saw. You said that many of the people who came to that location to vote, you said many people said the name was incorrect on their ID to being because they'd been married or divorced. Is that right?
Yes.
And you said that many people said the address on their IDs were incorrect because, they had moved recently. Is that right?
Yes.
You said that many people who approached could not state the address that was on their ID or their current address.
Yes.
And you said that many people could not speak English and could not follow the directions of the state and name and address. That's state your name and address is the standard question you asked, and they didn't understand, right?
Correct, and they were allowed to vote and allowed to go to the line anyway.
All right, now here's the thing that sort of got my attention. You said that many times the voter stated their age, but when you looked at them, they didn't look that age, right?
I had an app. Okay. I worked for Project Orca, and on the app it said, John Smith, age 42, and that person was obviously 18.
Okay.
I mean, couldn't possibly be 42.
And you saw that happen a lot?
Many times, yes.
All right, and then you say that this is the one that I went, what? Many times when I went to check off the voter as having voted, you found that the voter was already checked off as having voted.
Yes, and the person who was next to me, who I was talking to the most, she kept on saying, "What should I do? They've already voted. It says that they've already voted." But the line was so long, it was so busy, and we were under strict instructions not to talk to the voter, so we were not allowed to interfere with the voting process.
So how often did that happen? How often did that happen where somebody came in and said, my name is so-and-so, so-and-so, and as you go to the list to check them off the list, you find, what? They're already checked off the list because, according to this, they've already voted.
Oh, I'm going to guess, for me personally, probably 30, 40 times.
Wow.
And was there anybody there at the polling place that you could report these things to, or you could take note of it and follow up?
We had a phone number to call, and it was such a chaotic mess with the lines that it was difficult to find a break. But one of the ladies who was having trouble with her getting her app working, she was making most of the phone calls into legal and into the headquarters. And
this would be the Romney campaign headquarters,
yes.
Right?
And one time I called them, and I just took a break. I was so frustrated. The line was stopped. They had to stop the voting line because there were too many people in the facility, and they stopped the voting line. They did this about 4 times for 20 minutes, and I just went and observed the line, and I had to say there were probably about 300 people in line, and I was calling the Romney people, and I said, this is total voter fraud. It's rampant. I can't tell you how much voter fraud I'm seeing, and there was nothing they could do about it. I mean, it was just. I think the lawyer came over a couple of times, but didn't have a chance to speak to me.
Right now, there's a couple of things else I got to get to here. Mm-hmm. You said that while you were sitting there observing, that you're pretty sure you saw the same person voting twice, or there were cases where you heard the same name come up twice throughout the day.
Mm-hmm. And if it was this John Smith and there was more than one John Smith on the app, that would be okay. But it was a person who said their name, and I looked, and I'm like, never heard that and that name. And then I looked, and there was only one of those names, and so I couldn't check the person off again because they had already voted.
So overall, what I'm hearing here, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to make sure we get all of this into the record. Mm-hmm. There were cases where people didn't seem to be able to tell the poll workers their name and address. You saw cases where when they stated their age, you would check the age on their app, and then you'd say that person's supposed to be 42, and they looked like they're, what, 13?
Right.
So that didn't make work. There were a lot of cases where they couldn't really answer the questions that were asked, the basic state your name and address kind of questions. You saw people that you believe voted twice. Uh-huh. There were cases where you heard the same name. It was maybe a name that stuck out in your mind, and you heard that name come up more than once. Yes. But most importantly, there were 30 or 40 cases where when somebody stated their name and you went to mark them off the list as having voted, you saw that they had already voted.
Yes, there was already a check mark there. There also, the poll people would help the people out with their address. Like if they were struggling, they'd say, "Is it such and such a street on such and such a number?" And then the person would go, "Oh, yes, that's it."
Oh my gosh! So
they were being led. Point?
Yeah.
What's the point?
So I guess the real question I have for is, at the end of the day, do you feel like the voting process at the Elks Lodge there on Mineville Road was fair and was it clean?
No. If I had to guess, I would say, and I was not outside, so I cannot verify this, but there had to be people just being bussed in or being paid to vote or something. I mean, there were so many. If I had a chance to pull people out of line and say, "You're not the right age," or that's not your name, you're not obviously not Asian, and that's an Asian name, or you're, so on and so forth. Then you can't state your address. You say you've moved, and you're just giving the address verbally without having to prove anything, and then getting in the line. I mean, if I had pulled those people out, I mean, I don't know what percentage it would have been, but it was a large percentage.
So you don't think it was right? You don't think that what you saw was above board?
No, I do not think it was above board.
Have you talked to the Attorney General of Virginia?
Yeah, I sent him an email and with exactly what I sent to you, and he got back to me and said that I needed to contact the Board of Electors, which I'm going to do.
Wow. All right. Well, would you keep us in the loop on what happens with this? Because if this is a little microcosm of what went on in the Commonwealth of Virginia on Election Day, I would say that there's some pretty interesting questions that should be asked.
Yeah, just one more thing. On Twitter, when I tweeted out what I saw, some other person who worked the polls got back to me and said she saw the same thing.
All right. I think we may hear more and more about this. We'll stay in touch and find out how things go.
Dara Fox, WMAL listener and poll watcher, with a really, really troubling story. Thanks for joining us.
105.9 FM and AM 630, Washington's Mall, WMAL, where Washington comes to talk.
You know, Larry, I'm quite shocked by what I'm hearing from Dara, and I'm wondering if this is what was happening around the country. I mean, it's a fair question to ask.
Well, you hear these anecdotes, and then you hear somebody come in with all these details, and, well, Dara Fox has definitely got all of you out there excited about this because all the lines are ringing.
But you have concerns about all that.
Well, here's where I can't connect the dots, because if you believe all of this and you believe the Obama campaign's ground campaign got all these people to the polls to assume different identities to vote, that means there's probably about 1 million people out there who did this on Election Day, and I just can't believe you can keep 1 million people quiet.
You think it would have leaked out somewhere?
I can't at least somebody, over drinks later in the week said, "Hey, guess what we did?" And no one is saying anything about it.
Well, except why would you go out and admit that you just committed voter fraud?
Well, let's be obvious. Anyone who would be signed up to do this is probably not the brightest bulb on the tree.
The phone lines went crazy as soon as Dara got off. Kathy in Fairfax, you're on with Brian and Larry. What do you think?
Hi, guys. I hope you guys bring this on, because when I heard this story, I was so troubled by it. And the first thing that I thought about was Stephanie Cutter, who the day before the election warned the Democratic voters not to panic when they saw the numbers, because everything was going to be okay. Now, what the heck does that mean?
Right.
That everything's going to be okay? And then we hear this story from Dara, and if it happened in every single state, that would certainly be more than enough to put Barack Obama over Mitt Romney. It makes me absolutely sick, and everybody should be jumping on the bandwagon and doing what they can to make this right, because you know what? That is absolutely unacceptable.
Fired up, Kathy. Thank you. Quickly, let's go to Jason in Clifton. Jason, you're on with Brian and Larry.
Hey, Brian, I'm on speakerphone right now, but I heard your story this morning, and I just wanted to pass an interesting story to you. I have a really good friend of mine that lives in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he called me on November 6th, and he was so fired up because apparently he witnessed buses coming into his polling place, and when he inquired about it, he was just asking questions of various people. These folks were given free pizza and soda and bags of groceries, and were handed flyers as they were coming off the bus and kind of directed who to vote for.
Oh, my God.
Bags of groceries?
Yeah.
Well, at least they weren't Obama phones they were handing out there at the poll place.
All right.
To be continued. We're not going to let this go.
We'll stay in touch with Dara and see whether or not this actually gets followed up on. By the way, if you saw something that didn't look right on Election Day, why don't you drop us a line at mornings@wmal.com, and we'll follow up on it.
We will not let it go.